As your adventuring party stumbles through the twisting tunnels of the Underdark, you can hear something in the distance. Could it be another party? Perhaps some lost miners? Hell, even coming across some drow might be comforting after all the time you've spent down here. As the bends in the tunnels become even more confusing, your hope of escape dwindles. But those voices, they get louder. Eventually you can understand what it's saying, or can you? It doesn't seem to be saying anything intelligible, just gibbering. It babbles nonsensically, constantly. It echoes around in these stone caverns. The babbling is practically deafening now. The barbarian at the head of the party turns a corner and utters a cry of horror. You and the rest of the party rush to his aid and see a horrifying reddish mass of eyes, flesh, and mouths. It pulses and squirms. The fetid saliva that drips from its mouth sometimes explodes in a flash of light on the wall. You step toward it further and find the terrain soft and squishy, like walking in bread dough. You try to take another step, but you're glued in place. All of you are. As the creature gets closer and closer, you can only shout and scream as it begins to engulf you. You feel its teeth biting at you. All different kinds, thin and sharp, short and dull, rat's teeth, elf teeth, man teeth, all scraping your flesh off the bone. The last thought that goes through your mind is, what in the name of the gods is this thing? This, adventurers, is a gibbering mouther. Hail and well met, adventurers and game masters alike. Welcome to my channel. This is going to be the first in a series of videos called Menagerie of Monsters, where I choose a monster from the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition books and do a deep dive on it, covering lore, reviewing the monster's statistics, and combat prowess. Let's jump right into it. As you may have guessed, today's monster is one of my all-time favorites, the Gibbering Mouther. The Gibbering Mouther is perhaps one of the most terrifying and horrific monsters that Dungeons & Dragons has to offer. Not for its power and strength so much as what I would call its weird factor. The concept of a writhing mass of flesh, organs, mouths, and eyes that babbles incoherently is, at least to me, a truly terrifying thought. I absolutely love this creature, though I don't use it much, mostly because it's an Underdark creature, and I don't do a lot of Underdark adventures in my games. But still, I think its weirdness, combined with its abilities, can make it a very interesting monster to throw at a party, especially when they aren't expecting one. The Gibbering Mouther has always been a little bit on the light side when it comes to lore. No edition has ever given a definitive explanation of the Mouther's origins, only theory, despite the fact that it's been in the game ever since 1st edition. I really like to have lore for creatures, so I've written just a little bit for this absolutely horrific aberration. If there's one race that is known for its experimentations, it would have to be the Mind Flayers. The Mind Flayers, or Illithids as they're properly known, can't reproduce without other sentient beings, therefore they constantly experiment on other beings to increase their chances of survival. While most of their experiments are to enhance reproduction, very occasionally they try something else. One such experiment resulted in the creation of a horrific creature known as an Oblex. How they obtained an ooze to experiment on, who knows? Perhaps a group of Illithids pledged themselves to Jewiblex, the demon lord of slime. Perhaps some crafty ones developed a method to capture a wild ooze. But however they did it, they got one. These mad creatures bombarded it with psychic energy, and finally, they took the consciousness of a thrall and put it inside the ooze. It began to writhe, twisting and turning. Finally, they fed the ooze the body of the thrall that it had been made from. Then, more thralls they fed it. At the end, this ooze could take the form of each and every one of those thralls. The first Oblex had been made. Then, like any good scientist would, the Illithids decided to repeat their experiments. They captured another ooze. But this time, though they didn't know it, they had made a grave mistake, for the ooze they captured was a slithering tracker. A terrible creature made by dark rituals known only to the most ancient of hags and the most terrible of liches. Imbued with humanoid consciousness and a bloodlust fueled by vengeance, this tracker had stumbled into the trap of the Mind Flayers on its vengeful quest. The Illithids then subjected it to the same procedure as the last one, but it went wrong. The addition of a second consciousness and body to the slithering tracker was too much for it. It drained the blood of the body, turning red as usual for one of its kind. But when the consciousness was absorbed, the foul creature was unable to compensate. The two minds fused into one, each tormented by the thoughts of the other. It had a semblance of an ability to manifest into the form of its meals, but it was limited to the eyes and the mouths only. Once manifested, these features became permanent. It escaped the Mind Flayers, but, with its two minds unable to agree upon any course of action, it simply wandered and shouted incoherently, unable to even form a proper word. Finally, though, the two minds found something they agreed on. I am hungry. The terrible beast searched the Underdark for food, subsisting on rats and other small creatures, still absorbing their minds and bodies into its own. The echoes of mental torture still panged through this creature's mind, and it released this psychic dissonance, constantly warping the ground around where it crawled. One day, the beast came upon a group of dark elves hunting. Guided by its insatiable hunger, it attacked and consumed them, adding their mouths and eyes to the heaping mound of slime and flesh, and adding their minds to the maddening collective. More cognitive dissonance. It roamed and babbled until its minds once again agreed. I am hungry. And so it continued, till one day it became too large. Like all the oozes it had descended from, despite its aberrant nature, it split into two, each piece going their separate ways, even splitting the consciousnesses in half. It continued to grow and split, mangling the minds it absorbed until it couldn't think any more than a common animal. As for its blinding spitballs, well, can only be assumed that those were a limited form of psionics gained from its time with the Mind Flayers. And so now, these creatures roam the Underdark, terrorizing any adventurer who would come in their way. All right, on to the statistics now. Frankly, the Gibbering Mouther is a fairly plain monster when it comes to stats. Other than Constitution, its ability scores across the board are pretty unimpressive. With an armor class of 9, you pretty much have to be trying not to hit this monster. It has 4 abilities that require saving throws. 3 of these have a save DC of 10, making it easy for most PCs to overcome these. Its Blinding Spittle does have a DC of 13, and it does have an area of effect, but the blindness doesn't last very long, only until the Mouther's next turn. So a creature that fails its dex save is only going to be blinded for 1 round, which that can be devastating for some creatures. can be particularly dangerous for a character like a wizard or a sorcerer. This creature. Its gibbering feature can be interesting, acting similarly to a confusion spell, though with different effects, while its aberrant ground can trap some weaker PCs. Its big thing is its bite attack. Its bite deals a whopping 5d6 damage, a huge amount for a creature of challenge rating 2. While this does only average at 17, that's still enough to kill a low-level wizard or sorcerer. Interestingly, the Gibbering Mouther would seem to be extremely effective against these types of characters, these low-level d6 hit die casters, as they typically have low strength, which would likely cause them to fail the save against the aberrant ground feature, preventing them from running away from the Mouther. Sure, they could keep lobbing spells at it, but eventually you run out of spell slots. And once you're just resorting to cantrips, a 1d10 firebolt isn't going to do too much against a creature with 67 hit points. Overall, I think the Gibbering Mouther could be quite a bit stronger. I'd likely beef up its save DCs at the cost of reduced hit points, as even a low-level party shouldn't have much trouble making those DC 10 saves. That being said, it gets an A+ for style in my book. This monster is just so creepy, so inherently wrong, that many parties just wouldn't know what to do to it if they're new or they've just never experienced a Gibbering Mouther before. I think this would be great in a Lovecraftian horror-themed game, maybe as some sort of Shoggoth stand-in or something. I definitely think this monster has a lot of potential, but it does unfortunately fall behind in some key areas. But despite all of that, it is absolutely one of my favorite monsters in all of Dungeons & Dragons 5e. So, that's been the Gibbering Mouther. If you have any good stories about one of these bad boys, or if you have any ideas for what monster I should do next week, please leave it down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, and subscribe if you haven't already so you don't miss any of the wonderful content that I have planned for the future. Farewell, and may your adventuring days be many more.